meditations of my heart and my mind be acceptable to you, gracious and loving God. Allow me to be an instrument of your will, your peace, and your love. By your Spirit, nurture those of us who live in the kingdom, that we may be rooted in the way of your Son, Jesus. Amen. It seems as though we're in the middle of a series of parables that have to do with agriculture. And I guess this is understandable. It is July, and everybody's working in their garden and weeding and gathering the fruit of that garden. So, perhaps it's fitting. Last week, the gospel reading included the parable of the sower of the seeds, and how the seed fell on different types of soil, the soil representing us, and how we respond to the word. How we respond to the word. The parable made clear that the seed, God's word, is powerful enough to change the world, and yet, at the same time, is incredibly, incredibly vulnerable. The seed, the word, can be snatched away by birds to be chucked out by thorns. The question we were left with was, what kind of soil are we? What kind of soil are we? Next week, the reading, again from Matthew, is the parable of the mustard seed. This may indicate the kingdom is far smaller and much more subtle than what we would imagine. There was no grandiose flash to the kingdom, nothing outrageous when it came to the kingdom movement. It appears that God likes things to be, it likes to be behind the scenes, when and where changing hearts, where it's quiet, and where he can be gracious. This week's reading contains the parable of the wheat and the tares. It says weeds, but the original was tares. The farmer sows good seed in the field. However, when he is sleeping, the enemy comes in and sows weeds among the wheat. A servant asks the owner if they should pull out the weeds, and he says, no, that would disturb the wheat. He told them to let them grow together, and when it was time to harvest, they were to collect the weeds first, tie them up so they can be burned, and then the wheat can be harvested and stored in his barn. After the crowd left, the disciples asked for the explanation. Again, they seem clueless. They just don't get it sometimes. Jesus explains that the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man, and the field is the world. The good seed represents the children of the kingdom, and the weeds, the children of the evil one, the enemy, the evil one, the devil. Jesus explains that the reapers are the angels at the harvest, represent the end of the age. The weeds that are collected into bundles and the fire represents what will be at the end of the age. Quote, the Son of Man will send his angels and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers and will throw them into the furnace of fire. Jesus then continues, then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of the Father. Weeds, tares, also known as bearded darnel, similar to wheat but poisonous, very poisonous. It represents those who follow the evil one, those who don't treat others with grace and who do not praise Jesus. Those who follow the God, the kingdom of the children of the kingdom, are represented by wheat. They are to grow together until the harvest, till the end of the age. Now, some might wonder why pulling out the weeds would disturb the wheat. Most gardeners will know that. But if you look at an entire wheat field, periodically you'll see a weed in it. And the farmers don't usually go out and pull it out. You'll see sometimes corn left over from last year, corn stalk, right in the middle of the wheat. might hurt to eat. And to eat stands for true members of the kingdom, and the weeds are the fakes, the people that are not true members of the kingdom. We might wonder how we should behave. How we should behave when we are forced to grow right alongside these weedy people. It just doesn't seem fair that we have to grow up next to these weedy people. Just, doesn't seem fair. So, did you ever tell a joke? Everyone told a joke. I tell a joke. I'm lousy at it. People don't get my jokes. They're too dry, or they don't understand it. And then they say, what's that mean? And then I explain it, and that ruins the whole thing. Okay? But they say, what? And you explain it, they'll say, oh yeah, okay. Well, it's sort of like what Jesus did with the disciples. And to us. We may be tempted to forget some of what we are being taught. You might feel satisfied that the weedy people might get what they deserve. We might not feel about our wrongs so much, but rather more about our lives and future. After all, Jesus does leave us with the closing image of the righteous shining like the sun. Jesus said that. Perhaps the explanation that Jesus gives for his own parable lulls us into a false sense of security. Listening to him, oh, I got it. Okay, oh yeah, okay. We might miss that the parable is not really about the wrongs being righted. It's really not about that. Nor is it about what will happen to the weeds. The punishment on the last day. It's not about that. Rather, it's more about the wheat and how we react to that time leading up to the final sorting. This parable is about us. It's a message to us. It's about our lives right now, today. The farmer was of the opinion that the weeds were not a threat to the wheat, but the two were capable of living and growing together. The weeds do not threaten the wheat. Rather, the wheat comes from how the threat comes from how we react to the weeds. How we react to the weeds. How we react to sin. How we react to sin. It's not about rooting out sin or the danger of being in the presence of sin. The message is, and the challenge, is finding the strength to resist the temptation to take matters, one, to resist the temptation to sin, and the other is the temptation to take matters into our own hands and start yanking up every sinful thing that we see, and every time we see it. The challenge is not to be corrupted by sin around us, but it's not our job to pull it up. We think about that today, and we look at what's happening in our world. Certain books we're not supposed to read because. Certain people we shouldn't associate with because. Certain religions, the Methodists going through it right now, like the Lutherans have, and the UCC before them. I don't want to associate with those people, those weeds over there. I want to get rid of them. So they start a new denomination. Why can't we live together? Why don't we try to live together? In my look around yesterday, by the way, I lost my phone this week. Ever lose a phone, man, it's not good. It's not good. So I bought a new one because I can't find the old one, and everything's in it. But there was a thing in there about the first time. It's an article from 2021. It's an article about a young man who is voted homecoming queen of his school. Now, I didn't read the whole thing. It had an update how much vile messages he got in response to that being on TikTok. Probably still there, you can look for it. we don't have to pick it up and throw it out into the fire. That's not our job. Drag weeds, they're probably okay. You know, I don't understand it necessarily, but do we have to shun them? Do we have to pick at them and call them all sorts of evil names? Not according to Jesus. God will take care of this. In the end days, he will take care of it. And in the meantime, it's how we live our lives, how we respond to those things. If we look at how the master responds to the servant's questions regarding removal of the weeds, he replies, "No, for in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat among them." I think that's happening in our society right now. In our quest to root out the weeds, our whole society is being hurt. It's being hurt. It's being damaged. Our way of life is being damaged. Not so much about the weeds, but the people who won't pull the weeds. Let them live together, grow together until the harvest. Let's just let things be. Just let things be. According to some sources, the Greek word used there is the same word in the original text. It's the same word that's used in the Lord's Prayer. Now, I don't know this. It's just one of the things I read. And you know what it means? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. Imagine that. Forgiveness. I remembered as I was writing this, thinking of the farmer saying, the manager saying, the landowner saying, "Hey, let it be, let it be." I was at Maiden Creek Church quite a number of years ago, and I had this young kid as a client. Actually, as her mother was my client, but she came in, she wanted to talk to me alone about what her family was going through. And finally, she started to sing the Beatles song. Here's this kid, you know, it was great, it was great. Let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be. Think about that. Think about how powerful that is and how I think it matches what Jesus is talking about here. Let it be, let it be. There will be an answer. Let it be. We don't have to push God. We'll figure it out. He's pretty good at this. He's been doing it for a while. Now, there are two stories that this reminds me of. There was a minister who had a strange dream, very strange dream, and he died in this dream. And he was before St. Peter. And St. Peter said, "You need 100 points." Anybody hear this before? What, did you? No, you did. You need 100 points. Okay, one person heard it. I hate to tell the same joke twice. I didn't say this, but it's a story. It's not a joke. It's a message for all of us. You need 100 points. And the minister very proudly said, "Well, I've been in ministry for 43 years. And St. Peter says, 1 point. "What do you mean, 1 point? St. Peter says, "That's it." Well, I've been working in these different committees in the church, and I started all these programs in the church. St. Peter says, 1 point. And then he says, "I visit all these people at home. I visit all these people at home, hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of people." And St. Peter says, 1 point. "I need to remind you that you have 93 points to go." And the man says, "Oh my goodness, what will I do? Only by the grace of God will I survive." And St. Peter says, "That's your 93 points. Only by the grace of God." Okay, think about that. Only by God's grace. It's only by God's grace. St. Peter then invited him in. There'll be a final judgment, and each one does have a choice. Our way to heaven is rather simple. It's realizing that we all have some of those tares within us. We are all a bit of a sinner. those sins and accepting the fact that through God's grace we are forgiven. In the meantime, in real time, today, it's something we need to work on. Perhaps treating people with grace, treating people with respect, loving the unlovable and the untouchable. But in the end, it is all by the grace of God. The other story I'm reminded of is about a man by the name of Rufus Jones. Anybody hear of Rufus Jones? Probably no one. He was born in 1863 and died right after World War II at the age of 85. He was a very well-known Quaker, very well-known, Rufus Jones. I heard of him since I was that big. Rufus Jones, especially in the Philadelphia area. Rufus Jones in the Philadelphia area. However, his tentacles of good work were spread throughout the world through his countless speeches, his writing, editing magazines, and the many other chores that his positions required over the years. One of the greatest accomplishments was the founding, because of Rufus, the founding of the American Friends Service Committee, which is, you look it up, it's a remarkable organization. Provides people where other people won't go, and so forth. That was his biggest accomplishment, probably. While doing all this, Rufus wrote one book a year. One book a year. And during an interview, he was asked how he was able to write so many books, because each year he wrote one. How many books? And he answered, I wrote my books on Tuesdays. I write my books on Tuesday. Throughout his career, he set aside Tuesday to be the day where there were no appointments. Nothing scheduled, really. The only thing that was really scheduled was eating meals. Other than that, he wrote from the time from breakfast till night. He wrote. During the week, he would think of ideas, maybe, but he would never write them down. Tuesday was the day he would write. He followed a simple plan, but he left a tremendous amount of work behind. I guess I thought of the story of Rufus because of the planning. The planning. Each of us have heard the say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. We've all heard that. Jesus talked about those who don't plan, those who build towers without figuring out the cost beforehand. That's somewhere else. It's not in our reading today, but he talked about that. Even in the parable today, Jesus had a plan. Successful living requires that we give some thought to the future. Some thought to the future. We all have some vision of what our next place will be as we continue our journey to the end, or as we continue our journey. Many of us envision a beautiful garden, a quiet, safe place. But maybe today we have to sit down. We have to sit down and make a plan how we want to conduct our life today. What we want to do to rid myself of the weeds. How do I respond to other weedy people? Do I need to clean house? Do I need to look at myself? Do I need to pray and thank God for all that I have? Many people don't take the time to thank God for how fortunate we are. Do I follow the golden rule? It's so simple. It is so simple. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Do I offer to others the grace that God offers me? Do I offer to others the grace that offers me? What kind of soil are we that's left over from last week? How do we till our soil? How do we take care of that weed? Does the light of Jesus shine and radiate?